Usually when we think about how we interact with the world, there's this comforting mechanical precision to it.
Right, cause and effect.
Exactly. Like, think about a radio. You want to hear music, you tune the dial, and physical electromagnetic waves bouncing through the air hit a physical metal antenna on your dashboard.
It's clean, measurable.
Yeah, it follows the rules of physics.
Yeah.
But then you step into the world of parapsychology, and suddenly that physical radio is completely gone. We are looking at a landscape where the antenna is supposedly, just your own brain.
Which is a terrifying thought for a physicist.
Oh, absolutely. And the signal you're trying to pick up isn't a top 40 pop song. It's a windmill 100 miles away, or maybe even a hovering, unidentified, anomalous craft.
It really is the absolute definition of muddying the scientific waters. I mean, when you remove the mechanical tools, you're left trying to measure the invisible.
Which is exactly what we are plunging into today. Welcome to today's custom-tailored deep dive, where our mission is to explore the wild, highly debated concept of psionics.
And we have a really fascinating stack of sources to go through for you today.
We do. We're looking at a mountain of material. We've gotten declassified CIA files from Project Stargate, whistleblower testimonies from Reddit forums, massive, brutal statistical wars fought between physicists and psychologists, and even some crazy cultural artifacts.
Like role-playing game manuals, which actually provide a surprisingly good framework for this.
Yeah, they really do. So we want to figure out, is psionics a natural gift you're born with? Is it a dangerous curse? Or is it an actual methodical skill that anyone can learn? And can science actually prove it exists?
Okay, let's unpack this, because the very word psionics sounds like science fiction.
Well, that's because it literally is science fiction.
Wait, really?
Yeah, from its inception. To understand if this stuff can be weaponized or measured, we have to look at where the concept came from. If we look at the etymology, the term psi was coined in 1942 by a biologist named Bertold Weisner and a psychologist, Robert Thouless.
Psi, like the Greek letter, right? The 23rd letter of the Greek alphabet, because it's the first letter of the Greek word psyche, meaning mind. They wanted a neutral placeholder to describe unknown factors in extrasensory perception, or ESP, and psychokinesis, PK.
So they were trying to find a term that sounded academic, something that didn't evoke images of a carnival psychic gazing into a crystal ball.
Exactly.
Oh.
But the word psionics itself was coined later, in 1951, by the science fiction writer Jack Williamson. He blended psi with electronics.
Psionics, wow.
Yeah, and it was championed by the influential sci-fi editor John W. Campbell. So from the start, the word was this bridge between the mystical mind and rigid mechanical engineering.
Which actually perfectly mirrors how we culturally categorize this stuff today, which brings us to that fascinating cultural artifact in our material, the Dungeons and Dragons lore.
Right, the RPG manuals.
Yeah. And, you don't need to be a tabletop gamer to appreciate this, because the game's lore is essentially a distillation of how humanity tries to put unexplainable mental phenomena into neat little boxes.
And those fantasy archetypes map surprisingly well onto real-world psychological debates.
They really do. According to these texts, humanity views psionics in 3 distinct ways. The first box is viewing it as a curse.
An immune response, right?
Exactly. It's framed as an immune response to the corruption of reality by unnatural alien entities from the far realm. It's a defense mechanism that literally drives some people mad.
Interesting. And the second?
The second box views it as a gift. The texts talk about psionic bloodlines. They describe beings called the Elon, which are perfected souls placed into new bodies, or individuals uniquely chosen by a god named Ioun. Basically, you're born with it. You have the magic blood or you don't.
Which leaves the third category, the one that arguably causes the most controversy in the real world.
Right, the learnable skill. The lore details these academic aliens who treat the mind as a rigid science. They study complex geometry, alchemy, and history in secret colleges just to unlock their brains.
It's the classic debate of innate trait versus trainable muscle.
It's just like the debate over musical genius. Like, are you born with perfect pitch, or can you unlock it after 10 years of rigorous, grueling practice at Juliard? But here is where I get hung up on the skill argument.
Let me guess. Why isn't everyone doing it?
Yes. If it's just a learned skill, like doing calculus, why aren't there psionic universities on every street corner?
Well, if we pivot to the real world, there actually was an organization that tried to build that university. And they had very deep pockets. Because if this can be learned, the military wanted to learn it first.
Oh, right. Project Stargate.
Exactly. Between 1977 and 1995, the CIA and the Defense Intelligence Agency ran a $20 million program. It was sparked by fears of a psychic gap with the Soviet Union.
A psychic Cold War. That is so wild.
It really was. They focused primarily on a technique called remote viewing. This is where individuals sit in a controlled room and try to visualize distant, hidden targets.
And the examples from the declassified files are crazy. In one experiment, they had a sender physically travel somewhere, and the viewer back in the lab had to sketch the location.
And they got some surprising hits.
Yeah, one particularly talented viewer accurately drew windmills when the sender was at the Altamont Pass windmill farm. And later, they drew a footbridge stretching across a marsh when the sender was at a wildlife refuge, just based on this purported mental connection.
It's a striking visual.
Yeah.
But ultimately, the CIA abandoned the program for active spying. They called it too unreliable. I mean, you can't launch a strike based on a fuzzy sketch.
Right, obviously.
But the Defense Department kept funding it just to determine if the underlying mechanism was real. They wanted the science.
And here's where it gets really interesting, because that government interest bleeds straight into the modern mysteries we see today, specifically UAPs, unidentified anomalous phenomena.
Yes. The modern UFO lore.
Right. There are claims from a recent UAP whistleblower named Jake Barber. According to the source discussions, Barber alleges the U.S. military currently has psionic assets within its ranks.
He paints a very dark picture of how those assets are developed, too.
He does. He claims the government has conducted highly unethical experiments, even on children, to cultivate these abilities. And the alleged reason why is fascinating. Barber claims there is a psionic component required to interact with or even summon UAPs.
Like a key.
Exactly. You can't just hotwire a flying saucer with a screwdriver. You need your brain to interface with the craft.
Now, we need to be clear here. We are impartially reporting these claims. We're not validating them. What's truly fascinating is how persistent this narrative is. The idea of obtainable psionic skills is deeply woven into military intelligence and modern UAP lore.
We deeply want to believe our minds can pilot the impossible. But for whistleblowers to be taken seriously, you need hard, measurable data. Which brings us to the science. How do you put a mind in a petri dish?
That is the hurdle. And the answer parapsychologists came up with is micropsychokinesis, or micro-PK.
Micro meaning tiny, invisible influences.
Right, rather than levitating a car. Scientists use random number generators, or RNGs. And a true RNG isn't just an algorithm on your laptop. It's driven by true physical randomness.
Like radioactive decay?
Exactly. Radioactive decay or electronic white noise.
Yeah.
The experiment is straightforward. You ask a subject to sit there and mentally force the machine to output more ones than zeros.
Okay, wait, hold on. I have a major pushback here based on the texts. If a machine is truly random and a subject manages to get a high score, how do we know they used psychokinesis to change the machine versus using precognition to just predict what it was going to do?
That is a brilliant observation, and it's the exact problem the scientists slammed into. It led to a major theory in the field called decision augmentation theory, or DEAC.
I love date. It completely changes the definition of what we're looking at. It's like, instead of a hammer, the mind is a radar.
The surfer analogy, right?
Yes. The surfer doesn't create the wave. They just have this intuitive, precognitive sense of exactly when the wave is going to swell, and they choose that exact millisecond to stand up. You aren't forcing the quantum dice to land on 6. You just feel when to roll them.
That is a perfect analogy. Do you have to suggest PK might actually just be precognition, foreseeing a natural statistical fluctuation? But regardless of whether it's the hammer or the radar, these automated tests generated millions, sometimes billions of data points.
Which sparked the meta-analysis wars.
Oh, absolutely. When you have decades of automated data, the battleground shifts to the statistics themselves. Let's look at the case for Psi first. In 2018, Essel Cardania published a massive meta-study covering over 750 studies.
And he concluded there is cumulative support for Psias, right?
Yes, comparable to established psychological phenomena. And then you have Jessica Utz, a statistician from UC Davis. She reviewed the Stargate data and concluded that psychic functioning is scientifically proven by standard metrics.
She said we should stop asking if it works and start asking how.
Exactly. But the skeptical pushback is fierce. Psychologist Ray Hyman reviewed the same data and argued it's inconsistent and irreproducible.
Because statistics can be manipulated. Which brings us to Wilfried Kugel's scathing takedown of the 2006 BSB meta-analysis.
Yes, the BSB researchers published a paper trying to prove definitively that psi didn't exist. But Kugel went through their math and found absurd methodological errors.
Like mixing ESP studies with PK studies, which sounds fine until you realize they measure completely different baselines.
Right. In ESP, you expect normal random chance. In PK, you are specifically measuring the deviation from chance. If you mix them, the ESP data pulls the PK deviations right back to zero.
They mathematically cancel each other out.
It's blending apples and oranges to prove fruit doesn't exist. And Kugel didn't stop there. He noted they used predictable pseudo-RNGs, like the digits of pi, instead of radioactive decay.
You can't mentally influence pi. It's a mathematical constant.
Precisely. But the most glaring error was relying on a single, potentially broken machine from the peer lab. This mega-reg machine generated billions of negative trials that flooded the analysis. Kugel showed that without that one machine, the entire meta-analysis would have actually been positive.
A single broken machine skewed everything. But honestly, this heavy reliance on statistics is exactly what infuriates physicists.
Because physicists demand observable mechanics. Robert Park made the most damning skeptical argument here. He said, if the mind can truly move matter, you don't need complex statistics. Just put a microbalance on a table and mentally push it.
And the microbalance stubbornly refuses to budge.
Not even a fraction of a millimeter. And the physics community backs that up. If telepathy were real, it would have to obey the inverse square law. But supposedly, a telepathic signal is just as strong across the globe as it is across a table. That breaks the rules.
It violates thermodynamics, too. Moving a scale requires energy. Plus, the neuroimaging studies on twins showed absolutely no unique brain activation during purported telepathy.
Nothing.
So, if it violates classical physics, how do proponents reconcile this? How do you explain the impossible?
You have to look for a new kind of physics. And that is where the field shifts toward the theory of psychic quanta, or TPQ.
Quantum physics, of course.
It attempts to unify these concepts. It suggests there is a universal, atemporal psychic field. All possible states exist in superposition until localized by a brain system.
Okay, but how does an atemporal field fix the problems? How does it explain the surfer catching the wave?
Because it's atemporal. It allows for information to flow backward in time. Retrocausality.
The future affecting the past.
Yes, it mathematically explains precognition and gut intuitions without breaking the classical rules of linear neural processing.
So it's a literal signal from your future brain echoing backward. That is wild. And it also brings up the observer effect, or experimenter psi.
Arguably the wildest concept we found. In some trials, the expectations of the scientists running the experiment seemingly influenced the results. The scientist's desire was collapsing the quantum superposition.
That is mind-bending. So to summarize this incredible journey for you, we've traveled from sci-fi magazines and D&D lore to CIA remote viewers sketching windmills, all the way to massive statistical battles and quantum retrocausality.
It's a vast landscape. But the big takeaway here is that whether psionics is a genuine quantum phenomenon, flawed statistical software, or a requirement for flying UAPs, our human obsession with transcending our physical limits remains one of our most enduring traits.
We want the radio to be magic, and that leaves me with one final thought for you to mull over today. If experimenter Sci-Fi is real, if the mere intention and expectation of a scientist can subtly alter the random outcomes of the universe, does that mean the rigorous skeptics and the passionate believers are both fundamentally right? What if each side is literally projecting their own expected reality right into the data? Keep your mind open, but always check the math.